Okay, the third quality of a successful student, I'd have to say that in addition to motivation, you make a commitment. So, what do I mean by the word commitment? So, it means that you promise to do everything that you can to make something work or to make something happen, and you actually follow through on that promise. Now, we hear the word commitment very often associated with, of course, the institution of marriage, but you can be committed to many, many other things besides marriage. But when you do commit to marriage, what are you saying? Well, you're saying that you will love, honor, cherish in sickness and in health, right? We're doing the wedding vows to this other person in words and action. Now, when you commit to your studies and to college, you're saying that you're going to do everything in your power to learn in words and in action. So whereas motivation that we just talked about kind of gets you started, commitment is what keeps you going. So commitment involves something we've already talked about, personal responsibility and a plan. So successful students have already accepted the personal responsibility. They've already accepted the ownership of the situation. And then they make a plan and they take action to improve that situation. So they accept ownership, they have a plan. Not only do they say things that reflect this ownership and plan, the words, they actually take concrete steps or actions to make it happen. So making a commitment implies really crossing this kind of hypothetical line. It's kind of the difference between saying you're wishing or you're hoping, you're liking, you're trying, you're wanting, and you're actually committing or doing. So as we move along that scale, you're moving to the high level of commitment. It's really the difference between kind of saying I will, and maybe never doing it, and I am doing it. Because anyone can promise anything, but individuals who are committed actually take the concrete action. Okay, another trait of a successful student, they need to have a positive attitude, mindset, and use the language that goes with it. So basically, again, we've talked about this, they are a creator. And you're probably also noticing how all of these traits that we're talking about sort of loop back and interact with each other. Right? So positive attitude, mindset, and language. We've already talked about the fact that negative feelings and thoughts and words really don't do us any good. When we worry and dwell and fret, it really only makes us worry, dwell, and fret. When we whine, complain, blame, and make excuses, well, that really only wastes our time and energy, right? So negative thoughts and feelings and even the words not only waste our time and energy, but they actually are scientifically proven to program us to fail. And even if you look at something as simple as memories, when chemicals are released into your brain when you are negative or you're stressed, it can actually block the ability of your neurons to communicate with each other, and you can forget things. So these are not productive behaviors, this kind of negative stuff that we do. So whatever it is that we're thinking and feeling and saying to ourselves, we actually kind of make a reality. When it comes to successful students do not hinder themselves with kind of this woe is me attitude, this defeatist attitude. And so they're constantly replacing the I can't or I won't statements with the desire to make it happen. I can, I will. They also tend to be great visualizers of the success and their goal, and they aim for it because they have the plan, and they find some kind of a way to make something happen instead of kind of circling that drain with the complaining and the blaming and the excuse making. So their positive thoughts and feelings and words actually kind of prime that pump towards having effective behaviors rather than allowing the negative thoughts and feelings and words to kind of prime that pump for ineffective behaviors. So a fantastic quote to go with this slide is, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. Because in reality, what we believe, we make a reality. Okay, so let's say we have a hypothetical student. Her name's Sarah. Sarah accepts personal responsibility. She's self-motivated. She's committed. Sarah has a positive attitude, a positive mindset. She uses positive language, which all awesome. She's checking all 4 of our boxes. She's rocked 4 of our successful student traits. It's fabulous. But just because she has all of those great traits, it doesn't mean that she's not going to encounter problems or challenges or obstacles or whatever you want to call them. Sarah's going to encounter them. Everyone does. I did and do. You do and will. Nobody on the planet is exempt from challenges and obstacles. And in reality, you really don't want to be exempt from challenges and obstacles completely, because I know it sounds kind of ironic though, but the challenges make you grow if you address them the right way. So what are these things? What are challenges? What are obstacles? They are ideas and issues and situations that either stop us dead in our tracks, or they impede us, they slow us down from, reaching our goal or from being successful in our goal. They're basically something that gets in our way of marching forward towards our goal. And sometimes challenges or obstacles, come from the outside world. Sometimes they come from our own internal world. Sometimes they're combinations of both. But if we're being realistic, we know that there are usually some kind of challenges in school, in our jobs, in our careers, in our relationships, and just life in general. So I want to ask you guys what you think are some of the most common challenges, the most common obstacles that college students encounter that might prevent them from being successful or as successful as they planned. And if you want, go ahead and stop my voice just briefly and make a list of some of the challenges that you faced in the past or that you are currently facing, or maybe even that you predict you might face in the days and semesters and years ahead. Now, of course, there are a whole host of challenges. There are different challenges for different people. There are different obstacles at different points in school and jobs and life. And so the list that we're going to go over, it is not comprehensive. I'm just going to give you a few of the biggies that college students have. So what are some of the biggest obstacles for college students? And I think we could all agree that first up, time and managing time, avoiding procrastination, right? Dealing with time wasters, and really the whole topic of time management is really more of a topic about self-management. We all have 24 hours a day. We all have to-dos, duties, and responsibilities. So sometimes some students struggle with is really self-management, which is managing themselves and their life relative to time. So it can definitely be an obstacle that they have to overcome. Another challenge students oftentimes admit to having is something related to money. Not having enough of it, of course. I think we all can relate to that. I think we all want more of the green stuff, no matter where we are on that money scale, but probably the issue is more about money management, managing what we do have. It's just like time. It's not really about how much time or how much money we have, but it's how we manage ourselves relative to time and money. But it can definitely be an obstacle in school and in life. Another big challenge for college students usually is related to some kind of combination of hard and soft skill sets. So the skill sets that you need to succeed in college may not actually be there. You could have obstacles tied to, hard skill sets like struggling with reading with a purpose, or you have trouble taking good notes, you don't have the best memory, you experience test anxiety, or you have to deal with challenges of writing essays, writing papers. Other students might struggle in specific subject areas: reading, math, writing, science. Other students may struggle with access to technology or the use of technology. There's a whole other batch of skill sets tied to soft skills, people skills, social skills, communication skills, dealing with change, adaptability, attitude, dealing with one's own attitude. And a really big one is, emotional intelligence, dealing with managing and handling your own emotions. So guys, this is just a small list of challenges that I've mentioned. There are tons, but remember, we always have to look at the positive side of challenges. And I even suggest that we change the word from challenge to opportunity. So I'm going to go ahead and put that word on the screen. If we see an obstacle, right, a challenge as an opportunity for growth and for development, we actually change our perspective that it's a problem, and we find ways to grow, to change, to adapt, and hopefully to learn. So it reframes everything when we change our perspective, when we change our mindset. Again, the idea is that we're moving from, of course, the victim mode to the creator mode. Okay, so we talked a little bit about challenges and obstacles, but let's get back to our list of the 5 traits, the 6 traits of successful students, right? With reference to the challenges and obstacles, right? Or whether we call them opportunities, what is the difference between successful students and unsuccessful students? And we know the answer, right? When the unsuccessful student encounters a problem or hits some kind of a barrier, we know that they quit or they drop out or they ignore the problem and it becomes worse over time, a much bigger problem, and then they quit, then they drop out. Successful students, though, they're marching along, towards their goal. They hit an obstacle. At first, they may be a little bit stunned, but after that kind of initial shock, they recognize they've hit a barrier. They have all the traits of successful students we've already talked about, right? They accept personal responsibility, they're motivated, they've made a commitment to succeed, they have a positive mindset. So then what do? Is they develop a strategy to overcome the problem. They find solutions to move, over or around or through the obstacle because they know that this barrier is not going to stop them because they have developed or they will develop whatever it is strategy that they need. They're going to be, adaptable. They're going to be flexible. They're going to be willing to learn. So guys, my fifth trait of a successful student, as you can see it on the screen, they develop a strategy to be successful. And there are literally thousands of strategies to be successful in different problems. So we have a lot of sub-traits, right, of being a successful student. So just an example, let's say an obstacle is that, we're procrastinating and we're waiting to do all of our work on Sunday right before the due time, right before noon. And so our grades are reflecting the fact that we're kind of rushing and we're doing less than that excellent high quality work. So we finish with week 4 and we have a D or an F, and we have to ask ourselves, well, what am I going to do? Am I going to keep doing the same old behavior, or am I going to develop some kind of a time management strategy? You could have another student who's hit an obstacle in a history class. They're struggling with reading at the college level vocabulary out of their textbook. They're not making it through the chapters. So, what do? Do they not read? Do they drop the class? No, that's an unsuccessful student. They find a way. Maybe they work with a tutor to read passages and learn how to paraphrase and take notes over the textbook. Maybe they keep their own kind of diary of new words they're encountering. So those are all strategies. We also might be struggling in our personal relationships outside of college, and that's affecting our quality of work in college. And we can't just ignore that. We have to find some kind of a course of action to change our results. And that might be, going to see an STC counselor. It may be writing in a journal and doing a little bit of reflective activity about toxicity, what's setting us off, what's causing us trouble in school, what specific behavior of that toxic person is hurting us, and develop a way to eliminate the toxicity, right? But regardless, we do something. We have some kind of a strategy. But when we talk about these strategies, guys, please remember the strategy needs to be specific. It needs to be concrete and measurable. Try not to be generic when you're doing your strategy. So since we've now talked about obstacles and strategies, I did want to share one of my all-time favorite comic strips, Calvin and Hobbes, from Bill Watterson. And just a little backstory, Calvin's little boy, you see in the picture, he's a 6-year-old little boy, very intelligent, but very mischievous. And he has this stuffed animal tiger named after the philosopher Hobbes, who comes to life to Calvin, and they spend their days playing and talking. And whenever I read this comic, I always think of my students. So here they are, their take on this situation. Right? Calvin says, ever sit and watch ants? Look at this one. He's carrying a crumb that's bigger than he is, and he's running. And if you put an obstacle in front of him, he'll scramble like crazy until he gets across it. He doesn't let anything stop him. I just can't identify with that kind of a work ethic. So, ever sit and watch ants, right? Well, we all have, right? And the idea here is we've all been fascinated with ants, the leafcutter ants. There's this huge trail of them going somewhere so purposely. They're carrying a load that's a gazillion times their body weight, and they're running. And if we put a foot in front of them, they go around. If I put a 6-foot board in front of them, they go around. If I chop down an enormous tree, right, put my foot in front of them, do whatever, they go around. So the only way to stop the ants is Stomp City. And so we have to think of this as ourselves. We're carrying a crumb that's bigger than we are. We're running, and at some point there's going to be an obstacle put in front of us, and we're going to find a strategy to get around, over, through. Nothing is going to stop us from getting to and through to our goals.